Hello. Hi, everybody. I want to thank you for tuning in. And I want to thank Liz and Brandon for organizing this. As she said, I'm James Sulak, and I'm going to talk today a bit about a little side project I've been working on called aQuery, which is a new and better and I think more fun way of working with the document object model, XML inside of Arbortext. I decided to work on aQuery probably about a year ago when I had to create a non-trivial GUI dialog box for Arbortext. I had been away from Arbortext for a little while, and when I started working, I quickly remembered that working directly with the DOM, which is the built-in way to interact with XML JavaScript, made me sad. Maybe I'm just a little bit dull, but to me the DOM is kind of a minefield of strangely named methods and a structure that kind of forces you to write a lot of code and seemingly not get very much done at the same time. Now, the reason I was away from Arbortext is that I've been doing a little bit of web development. And it turns out that web developers have the same problem. The DOM in a web browser is pretty much identical to the DOM in Arbortext. It's based off the same W3 standard. It's the same interface. But web developers have actually solved this problem by creating various JavaScript frameworks that abstract all that annoying DOM stuff away. The most popular of those by far is a library called jQuery, which you've probably heard of. This is the website for it. It's used by a lot of major websites. Used by Google. It's used by Microsoft. I mean, the chances are, if you've seen any kind of like Ajax-y Web 2.0 stuff, this is a good chance this is what's behind the scene. And one of the reasons it's so popular is that it dramatically simplifies traversing and manipulating the DOM. People use it and they don't want to go back to writing plain old JavaScript, and that was definitely true for me. I mean, it's really a joy to work with. And, I wanted to join Arbortext, so hence, aQuery. So, I mean, that's what aQuery is. It's jQuery ported to work in Arbortext in an XML-only environment. Now, for those of you out there with multiple monitors, I'll go ahead and throw up the project website. And there's the address. It's github.com/jsulak/aQuery. And as you can tell, it's completely open source, downloadable, and it's just like jQuery itself is open source, which is, one of the cool things about open source. I mean, I can guarantee that the original creators of jQuery never conceived that it would be used in Arbortext editor. But because it was open source, I was able to port the API and even reuse a lot of the original code that was in jQuery in this project. So this is the project web page. You can actually look at the source here. It'll come up. If you're interested in that. The main page has some documentation on it about how to use it. And if it lists the methods, jQuery methods that have actually been ported. If you're familiar with jQuery and used it before, it's basically all the manipulation methods and a lot of the traversing methods have been ported. Basically all of them except one. aQuery has over 300 unit tests, so the parts that are implemented are pretty solid. And it was a lot of fun porting it, and it's a lot kind of interesting to see the internals of jQuery and things like that. So I guess that's enough just talking about it. I want to actually show you how it works. The first thing I'm going to do is give a really quick tour of aQuery functionality, and then work through building, time permitting, a simple Arbortext customization in GUI. Okay, so this is an Arbortext editor window. And what I'm going to use is actually the command line, which if you don't have it open on yours, you can go to Tools, Preferences, and go to Window and click Command Line and bring it up. And right now it says command, it's expecting ACL input. We want to actually give it JavaScript input, so you can press F5 and switch it to JavaScript. So the basic big thing in jQuery, or the basic kind of unit of work, is the $ variable, or it's called the aQuery constructor. And basically this acts as a function that you can pass a parameter to called a selector, which is usually a string. For instance, I'm passing a title here. And what this will do is we'll actually select all of the title elements in the document, return it as kind of an array-like object, which also includes the field length. You can see there are 11 of them. So what you do when you have this is you can actually manipulate these as a set. For instance, I can actually take all the title elements in the document, use the text method, and actually change the text of all the titles at once. And in fact, I can actually use another method called XML, which is based off the HTML method in jQuery, and actually pass it a markup string. And it actually parses that markup and turns it into XML. So this is just the simplest type of selector. It's just an element name. You can also use an XPath expression, kind of like an XSLT. So I can just select the section titles. And this is, if you're familiar with jQuery, it's kind of an alternative to jQuery's kind of custom selector syntax. It just uses XPath because we're XML people. We can deal with XPath. So I can change the text of just the section title here. Oops. To just howdy. So change this title, left this one in its original state. As another third type of selector, you can use the pound symbol to select an element by ID. So for instance, if I type in topic 1, this will select this element up here, which is the root element of the document. And I can use a method on it called empty. And what this will do is just delete all the content within the element. So that's just kind of a quick tour of all the different selectors in jQuery. There's actually also a couple more. You can pass in an OID, which is kind of the ACL, or built-in Arbortext command language way of identifying elements if you're kind of mixing JavaScript and ACL. And you can also pass it a DOM element and kind of get all those jQuery methods on the DOM element you already have for some other reason. Okay, so that's all, interesting and well and good, but the real purpose of aQuery is to make building ZUI dialogs or Arbortext customizations a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is show kind of a from scratch example building kind of a simple ZUI box that does some actual work, and just kind of show you how few lines of code it takes to actually get something useful done. So this is called XPath Explorer. This is actually based off a ZUI dialog box that Clay Hellberg of Terra XML showed at last year's PTC user. But the basic idea of this is that you can type in an XPath expression, for instance, section title, and if I were to click find, it would list all the OIDs or object identifiers, kind of just have basically a list of all the elements that it hits. And then I can click on any one of those and actually navigate to that in the document. And this is kind of a pre-built example just to show you what it's supposed to do when I'm finished. Okay, so this is a ZUI document, and this is, if you're not familiar, ZUI is kind of a declarative XML language that describes dialog boxes in Arbortext. And I'm not going to go too really in depth in the syntax of it, but you can kind of see it's a text box, there's a label, enter XPath expression, like it matches the dialog box I just showed you. And this code right here is what it accomplishes. I grab the document that refers to the ZUI box, and not the active document, the ZUI box. I'm going to pass this function, which I'm going to right now call Explorer Helper. And that's going to contain all the functionality and handling for the dialog box. I'm going to start writing it. So the first thing I want to do is actually bind an event, so like when you click the find button, it actually does something. But before I do that, I need to actually make the dialog box accessible. So what this is before, when I was just showing you in Arbortext, I used the $sign, kind of what was called the aQuery constructor function, to select elements in the document. But in this case, I don't want to select elements inside of my active document. I want to select, XML within the dialog box. So I have to use a different variable for that. I'm using this $sign constructor, which, if you're familiar with jQuery, is not in jQuery. But basically, and this will be a little bit clearer in a second, but I can use dialog in the place of $sign to actually work with XML inside the dialog box. So I'll go ahead and bind an event to the dialog box find button. And so what I'm doing is I'm using the bind method. First I'm selecting the Go button using the ID selector, and you can see it has an ID right here. And I'm binding the DOM activate event, in other words, kind of like the click event, to Go, which is a function I'm just about to write here. So the first thing to do when somebody presses find is I need to get the XPath expression. So what this does is, I select the XPath value element and just use the text method, which actually works as a getter and as an addition to a setter, and store it in this variable. And at that point, I can use the XPath expression to actually find all the nodes or elements in the active document that I need. So I'm using the same $sign aQuery constructor, and actually, since I want the active document, I'm passing that XPath expression. Results now contains what essentially is an array of all the DOM elements in the document. And so now I have everything, I can actually update the dialog. So I'll update that little text at the top that said like no elements found, or listed number of elements, by setting an attribute on that element. And now I'm actually going to update the list box. I'm going to grab the list box. And in case this is the second time it's run, I want to actually remove any list items within the list box. I don't want those around anymore, so I can use the same empty function I used earlier. Okay, so basically what we have now is I've taken the XPath expression from the user, I've found the results in the document, and I've reported how many results that we found, and I've emptied the list box. So now on basically one line of code, I can actually populate the list box. And this is kind of where the almost magic of aQuery comes into play. So I can take my results object, and for each of those, I want to append a new list box element, or sorry, list item element to the list box. So I'm going to just make up a little function and pass it to it. List box. Okay, so this is using the same ability I have to take a markup string and parse it into actual XML. So for each, and this is kind of a functional program method, instead of like using a for each or for loop to iterate over results and then append a list box, I can actually just pass it a simple function and it will execute it. With this kind of special reserved variable, this being the context node. And you can see I'm making use of the special aQuery constructor that takes a DOM node and a special OID method that I've added that returns the OID for a given element. So at this point, we have pretty much everything. And I can source the, or load the JavaScript document I just wrote. And if I didn't make any typos, this should work. Okay, so we have 9 results, so we got the same results. But as you can see, if I click on any of these, nothing's happening. So I need to bind, and basically bind one more event for list box. And that turns out to be fairly easy too. So I select the list box in the dialog, and I bind a function to the DOM activate event. Okay, so this is using the same bind method, and it's passed like this is the same event, event object that JavaScript usually uses, and I can get the OID from the value attribute of it and actually use ACL to navigate to it. So I'll load my source code again and see if it works. And I didn't make any typos, so it looks like it does. So that's just kind of a small, simple example of what you can do, kind of different features there are. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of code to it. And most of it, I mean, if you haven't used jQuery, aQuery can be a little bit foreign looking, but ends up after, only a little bit ends up being very natural to work with and very concise and a very kind of reliable way to do it. So that, I guess, is about what I have. If you want to try it out, there's the website address again for the project, and there's my email address if you have any questions. And I guess if anybody has any questions, that would be a good time to try to answer them.
All right, thank you, James. So I'll give everybody a chance to type in their questions. We did have one during the presentation, and the question was, does the aQuery library work with both JavaScript engines, Rhino and MSJScript?
Well, I wrote it for Rhino. I actually haven't tested it for the other engine in JavaScript, in Arbortext, so I guess I don't know. It could. Just need to test.
Excellent. Here's one, totally awesome. Have you deployed anything into production? Can you say what it does?
We have. A colleague of mine is actually working on a collection of Box with it right now. It should go into deployment fairly soon. We've deployed several other ones, so yes, we've been using it. It's been reliable.
Excellent. Let's see what everybody else is. Well, people are typing in their questions. I'm going to take the presentation back and show everybody all the resources available to Arbortext users. This is a good chance to do it. Ours is a large and active community, and over the years, if things have changed, a lot of people don't know all the resources available, and this is just a sampling. You want to go to the full list down there, the URL at the bottom of the page, and that'll keep an eye open for. We keep a good list of pretty much anything there. Let's see, we've got one more question. Well, it's not really a question, but it says excellent presentation, and I have to agree. Thank you, James.
Well, thank you. It's good to hear.
That's very cool. A lot of folks maybe don't know he demoed this over video for us at the demo jam at last PTC user because he wasn't able to attend, and I'm glad to get a much better look at it. This is very cool.
Yeah, it was pretty incomplete at the time. I think I said it was about 2% complete. Now I would probably say about 80% of the complete jQuery API.
Wow, very cool. All right, I don't see any more questions coming in. All right, so we'll end on early. Thanks for attending. We try to keep these short and tight and close to what everybody wants them to be, and please be sure to come next time. This is the Monster Garage by Single Sourcing, and next visit, which is the end of the month, we're doing data merge feature in Arbortext. So stay tuned and come back next time. Oh, wait, we got one more question before we finish. Question is, how hard is this to install, James?
It's not hard at all. There are 2 files that just need to be sourced on your init scripts for Arbortext, but at that point you have it all available. There's actually on the project page a kind of a sample custom folder you can kind of take a look at and see how it's done.
Perfect. That sounds great. All right. Thanks everybody for coming to the Monster Garage, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, James. Fabulous. Couldn't ask for anything better. Thanks.
Thanks.